Manager changed my schedule as a power move, so I stuck to it. A few years ago, I worked at a physical media chain in New England. My location was new, so when I was hired, I was interviewed by the district manager and a higher up because the manager hasn't been hired yet. When I applied, I made a very small window for availability, but I was also willing to close or work later shifts and work all weekends, so they agreed, and even though it was a set schedule, I did come in multiple times to cover someone else. The manager they hired was an absolute control freak. It didn't start bad, but it got ridiculous. She hated the fact that I had a set schedule, not because I was needed at other times, I was working the least desirable shifts, it was because she didn't control it. She even said that. About a year and a half of working there, and her dropping hints that we might need to renegotiate my schedule again. For no actual reason, she scheduled me to come in 4 hours earlier on the day before my weekend just to shake things up. I brought it up and she told me to make plans, essentially just get over it. I was mad, but I did just that. My wife and I planned a date night when I would have normally been working. On the day in question, I get a call saying that the person who was closing that night instead of me, she swapped me with a less reliable employee, had called in sick and I needed to come in my normally scheduled time. I was so happy to tell them that I was sorry but couldn't change in such short notice because I made plans. The assistant manager, who was just as giddy as the manager was to tell me about the shakeup, had to do a split shift and cancel a Tinder date because I did as I was told and made plans instead of being upset. Now to the comments. My go-to on days off has always been I'm at a bar/home drinking, you really want me to come in? If I don't want to go in on my day off, I crack open a beer after my first coffee. Sorry, boss. I'm already 3 drinks in. Pro tip. Drinks implies alcohol, but does not exclude non-alcoholic beverages. Had 3 coffees? You can say the above line truthfully. Ha, I love this. Something about management in retail seems to attract control freaks. I have a similar story. For the longest time, my schedule was fairly normal and I had nothing to complain about. I'd often work morning or midday shifts. Sometimes I'd need to close, then open, but it wasn't really a problem since it didn't happen very often. Then 2 things happened. First, the person in charge of scheduling moved to another store, and second, I started having to travel by bus. Neither of these things was a problem at first, but it quickly became apparent that the new person in charge of scheduling really wanted me to constantly close and open 2 or 3 times a week. Since traveling by bus meant that I spent an average of an hour or longer traveling between home and work, I actually could not get 8 hours sleep between shifts. I spent a good month trying to explain the problem to her in a way she'd understand, and she kept telling me it was just a temporary thing from one week to the next. Finally, she got tired of my complaints and told me that this was my problem and she just didn't care. She would not budge, or do anything to help me, period. She made it my problem, so I solved it. I changed my availability so I couldn't close on any day. Angrily she told me I couldn't do that I had to be able to close or she'd cut my hours. I called her bluff. And, yep, she did. For 1 week. Turned out, she couldn't afford to not have me do earlier shifts after reassigning people to close. Having a stable schedule where I can sleep regularly is a lot easier on me, I gotta say. Yeah, I had to basically do this myself. I work both for restaurants, and over the last 10 years understaffing has become more and more of an issue. And over the last 5 years, it's because no one is willing to work those jobs anymore, and then the people that were willing quit because they are working too much. Anyways, last year the staffing levels got worse in my department and I realized I physically and mentally couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't work 3 meals a day with all the close/opens, wasting gas to come home and sleep between a breakfast and dinner shift. and my being the furthest away from work at 45 minutes, needing an hour to wind down or shower/laundry/eat and an hour to get ready. Sometimes I had at most 5 to 7 hours of sleep available to me. Thankfully he is an accommodating boss. But I've definitely been slipping and my productivity is shit, so hopefully it will work out in the next month after I talk to him. Quit my dude. I was a chef too. Now I work from home making more money than I did in the kitchen. I miss most bits of it, but there's no honor in destroying your body for shit pay. I had a similar experience with my second ever job, working at a movie theater. I specifically took a night off of work to go watch an opening night movie with my dad. The thing about my dad is that we don't really have a whole lot in common, but we both love superhero movies. It's basically the only thing we bond over and it means a great deal to me. So we were going to watch one of the earlier MCU movies, and I booked the night off about a month in advance. I okayed it with my direct reporting manager and the location manager. I told them that it was going to be an opening night for a widely anticipated movie and I wanted to make sure that there wasn't going to be an issue. I got the green light. About 3 hours before the movie started, my direct manager calls me and asks if I can come in as the 2 other people working my shift were both sent home due to being ill, nasty flu that was going around the theater at the time. I told him that I had the time booked off a month in advance and that both him and his boss signed off on it. In no uncertain terms, I was told that if I didn't come in that it may be seen as you not needing the hours and therefore, they could be given to someone who was more in need. At the time I didn't really realize that I was being blackmailed into coming into work or getting fired. I ended up going in and covering the absolute hellish nightmare of a shift that was left for me, and my dad went on to see the movie without me, which really pissed me off because, and this rings true to this day, I have seen every MCU movie on release night with my dad, with the exception of this one. Much to my manager, his boss, and corporate's chagrin, I had already covered someone else's shift that week and was already over 40 hours. Now, considering I was part-time, in this case, it means keeping me at a solid 39 weekly hours as to avoid giving me benefits. This meant that I was entitled to overtime. It seems like nobody bothered to double-check the schedule because I had a total of 60 hours that week due to shift coverage and the impromptu last-minute call-in. My manager was fired after corporate called and gave his boss hell for scheduling me well over my hours for that week. Due to the aforementioned bug that went around the theater, it meant that I also couldn't reduce any upcoming shifts I had as I was one of the only ones cross-trained across all of the different areas. At 16 years old, seeing that next paycheck be nearly double what I was used to seeing was a bittersweet moment, although I still would have much rather had spent that time with my dad. That makes me absolutely seethe. And the higher-ups fired someone for this? This whole operation is a nightmare. Business owners owning none of their responsibilities. I'm with you though. I worked at a Golden Corral at 16 and my direct manager manipulated our time punches to erase hours we'd worked. Didn't last long as someone reported her, but she got the directive to do it from higher up. They really be having slave labor out of us. Thank goodness to the people who fought for your right to extra pay that week. Nobody fought for it. The swipe in and swipe out card system only works if your ID badge is present for that shift, and the security cameras would collaborate the narrative that I was there far more hours than I should have been. They didn't have a choice but to begrudgingly pay me my OT. Canada works a little different in regards to paying staff. I can relate. LOL. I was a full-time employee at a job and the manager would cut my hours and, very immaturely, would put all the employees' names on the schedule in order of who he liked best to worst. One of the last times he ducked with the schedule was when he dropped me from a 5-day week down to 2. When I complained to him, I got a "sucks to be you" answer back. He scheduled very unreliable people to work 5 days a week for the next 3 weeks. All the people he scheduled flaked on him. One quit. One was not even available to work the hours he scheduled, but he did not check. I guess he was just too excited to take my hours, and demote me to the bottom of the schedule. He then texts me that I am now on the schedule at 5 days. I shot back a text telling him I was not available, as I took hours at my PT job when he cut my hours. He was pissed. LOL, felt great. Why do people ruin their best employees? Because they don't like the idea that someone better is working under them. I remember working for a company that insisted everyone sending in an availability sheet before being hired. Well, I gave them one that said I was available 24 hours a day 6 days a week except for one day where I was busy for a 12-hour period, in the evenings of a day in the middle of the week. One day when I allow myself to be free from anyone's commitment. Thing is, they never gave these availability sheets to the schedulers. First 2 weeks, they'd ask if I could work that day and I would say no. Why can't they see my available hours? Turns out that management never hands those sheets in to those that need the information. Needless to say, I never really lasted long there. I've had more than one manager treat my stated availability as requested time off that didn't need to be honored if they didn't want to. Put a stop to that real fast, told them I wasn't coming in or finding my own coverage because I did the same as OP here and worked all the BS close, weekend, and overnight stocking already. They could figure out someone else for Wednesday afternoon. Literally the only day I refuse to work is Sunday. I can one-man band the entire department. I come in early and stay late. I'll work 6 days straight. I still get asked to work Sundays. It's been nearly 3 years.